From niche titles to extremely expensive niche titles, Toaplan's platforming puzzle arcade classic, Snow Bros, has seen multiple ports, including an unreleased one, a ROM hack that is often mistaken for the official sequel, and has references to Doom in it, no lie, and even a remaster. And while one would imagine that these games are the same, and yeah, in some regards, they kind of are, there are significant differences between all of them, helping each one to shine. Which, of course, begs the question, which version is the best? But to figure that out, we need a benchmark. And we're better to set the standard than at the very beginning with Snow Bros. Or, if you live in the States, Snow Bros, Nick and Tom. Hitting arcades in 1990, Snow Bros is an action puzzle platformer with a very simple premise. The kingdom of Snowland has been invaded. The twin princesses have been kidnapped by a large fire-breathing monster, and it's up to our heroes, two brothers wearing different colored overalls, to rescue them and save Snowland.
Hey, I've seen this one. This is a classic.
All jokes aside, the game is actually more akin to another of Toaplan's more well-known titles. That's right, Bobble. So much so that it is basically just a more polished version, with the same simple one-screen stages where enemies are mindlessly wandering around, with the simple goal being to catch them all, and then send them careening to their doom. So it's no surprise that they'd reuse the formula again. Now, while very simple in design, these stages, all 50 of them, and that is a very important number, I'm gonna need you all to go ahead and keep that lodged up in your head for later, are very much the earliest of classic arcade style setups. Basic platforms that you need to ascend. And gamer aside, you can only go up through the platforms, but not back down through them. But what makes all of this work is just how well the stages are all designed, offering up multiple pathways to the top, as well as different routes for your snowballs to travel downwards, ensuring that there isn't just one way to win, as well as changing up the themes every 10 stages, with the first set being as simple as just climb to the top, or say the last 10 stages actually let you fall through the bottom and come out on the top, which is actually a lot of fun. And despite only taking mere minutes to complete each stage, it's not going to be that easy, as Snow Bros has a solid difficulty curve, lulling you in with your standard Koopa Troopa style walk back and forth baddies, as it slowly introduces enemies that spit fire, climb through the stage, and even turn into an invincible tornado phasing through everything as they hunt you down. I don't like these guys. And they're not the only ones. Run out the invisible time limit, and the Grim Reaper's understudy will drop in to, motivate you to move that frostbitten ass. But aside from that aforementioned polish, I also gotta mention the bosses. As unlike its spiritual predecessor Bobble, with its one broken final boss, Snow Bros hits you with a boss every 10 stages, and they are all interesting and vary from one another, utilizing the game's simple mechanics wonderfully, and all in different scenarios. Bosses that teleport, fly, the stage 40 boss, which looks like it would be the simplest, but it's actually the hardest with all the sentient fireballs blocking every which way. Yeah, it's gonna take more than just some well-placed snowballs if you want to survive. This is a puzzle platformer for a reason. The optimal strategy is to climb to the peak of every stage. Look down at these worthless minions as you send them tumbling to the bottom, plowing over their wicked companions, racking up more points, but more importantly, unlocking power-ups, which better increase your odds of survival. The red potions give you a speed boost, yellow increases the range of your attack, blue potions increase your power, which basically means enemies turn into snowballs faster, and the green one is OP. Though it only lasts for a few seconds, letting you blow up into a balloon and just fly around the stage uninhibited, smacking everything in your path. And even better, you can actually stack all these power-ups, but you lose them the moment you die. And FYI, you are just as durable as a regular snowman.
I'm melting! Oh, what a world, what a world!
which is actually extra punishing here, as unlike most arcade games where you can just keep on popping in quarters until you win, Snow Bros actually limits your lives. Quarters are just continues, so losing all your lives means restarting the stage, or let's be real here, the boss battles, giving the game a more nuanced feeling of challenge, which is particularly stand out as arcade games are notorious for being cheap. Gotta squeeze the quarters out of you somehow. Still, if you're struggling, bringing in a buddy can help to circumvent this by using them as a shield.
Wait, what the? Get your hands off me! Wait, you got this!
Since with a friend, continues can be spent in level, and it ultimately just becomes a battle of attrition like most arcade games. And while we're on the topic of arcade games, as we are setting our benchmark, it should be pretty obvious that the older ports probably won't be able to mimic the aesthetics of the arcade version. And these ones are pretty wild, despite the actual layouts being fairly simple and straightforward. From pleasant patterns with bright colors to just, what is this arcade zaniness? Seriously, I can't even describe what half of this madness is. Seriously, what are these backgrounds? Not to mention, the entire series is just littered with cursed moments throughout. But you know what? It works. Snow Bros invokes that old fairy tale feeling. No. The kind before Disney. The ones that have the, darker undertone. It is super charming, and I love it. And the same can be said for the music. It's upbeat and super catchy, with a tad bit of whimsy thrown in there for good measure, fitting with the puzzle game genre. Only shifting to a faster, more action-oriented beat when the bosses show up. Overall, it's simple, fun, and charming. A great arcade experience, especially with a friend, and absolutely worth your time. So now, let's find out if the ports fare just as well. So starting off, we've got the mobile port, which is basically just the original arcade game, only on a smaller screen. And it sucks. The controls here just feel wrong, using this weird little overlay, and the actual joystick on it can actually move positions while you're using it. Because, you know, that's not gonna lead to cheap deaths or anything. Which, ironically, aren't cheap. When you hit the continue screen, which you absolutely will, in classic mobile fashion, microtransactions. If you want to keep playing, break out that credit card for some good old-fashioned digital currency, aka gems. Or you could just watch an ad. Ugh, nobody wants to do that. Ugh, microtransactions. Back in my day, we had the full game to play without having to... I think I lost my quarters. Otherwise, this version is just the same as the arcade, only intentionally made worse for profit. Give it a pass. Easily the worst of the bunch. Though ironically, a few gems or rolls of quarters is actually a pretty small price to pay compared to our next few ports. Developed by Soft House and released in 1991 by Capcom, Snow Bros is one of those rare and expensive NES titles that collectors clamor for. And we are talking prices before retro games started spiking. But unlike most rare titles, this one is actually good. Aside from the mobile game, of all of the ports, the NES version arguably has the least amount of notable changes made to it, outside of compensating for hardware limitations. Gone are a lot of the really weird and wacky background details from the stages, as well as the shading from the characters. All of the sprites are flat 2D colors, and surprisingly, it still works. Maybe even better. Still being very bright and colorful, with backgrounds maintaining that pleasant, whimsical feeling. Just minus all the nightmare fuel. Though it still has its cursed moments, but more so, it feels like the Saturday morning cartoon version of the game. Especially with the title screen after being punctuated by the addition of an all-new opening cutscene actually explaining the story, as the whole rescue the princesses thing isn't actually explained in the arcade version. I also have to bring up that the change in the graphics are felt in the gameplay as well, with some classic NES flickering, because everybody loves that. But it's mostly in the difficulty. Not having the power of its arcade counterpart, Snow Bros. On NES has a much smaller enemy count, most notably in the second boss, with it shooting way less bombs, and of course the fourth boss, who is just missing its twin. Plus half the stage doesn't feel like it's constantly on fire. Thank God. But it makes up for that fire in another way. The music. Now, while you'd think that the limitations of the NES would be holding the audio back, you'd be mistaken. While still maintaining the fun and catchy tunes of the arcade, it just feels faster and fuller in this version, standing out as one of the best of the series. The last major change is how the lives work. Seeing as how, at this point in time, the plague that is microtransactions hadn't infected home consoles yet. So we're stuck with a set amount of lives and continues. And even if you are playing single player, you can continue right after. But don't you worry, Wallet Warriors, just because we can't bust out our credit cards for an easy win or sink a few quarters, that doesn't mean we can't at least embrace the warmth of gambling. As this is the only version of the game that throws a little slot machine action after every boss fight to help you gain some extra lives. So I guess it all evens out. Overall, a fun and solid port worth checking out, but not like hundreds of dollars good.
Food is overrated anyway.
Keeping with the wallet wreckers, let's look at the most interesting case, Snow Bros. On Game Boy. Or, as the title screen would tell you, Snow Bros. Jr. If you've ever played anything on the original Game Boy, then Snow Bros. Jr. is probably exactly what you think it is. An even more scaled down version of the NES port. Same gameplay, same graphics, same music, all just more limited than before, with really the biggest hit actually being to the controls. Snow Bros. Jr. is easily the stiffest feeling game in the series. And while you'd think that I'd say that the lack of colors and details detracts from the game's charm, allow me to introduce you to the bosses. And here's the thing, obviously there was going to be shortcomings, but the devs clearly went in knowing that the cuts were necessary, and at the very least tried to make up for it a bit by literally incorporating these changes into the story, which is told differently than any of the other games. As this time around, instead of the princesses, your Snow Bro has been kidnapped, and it's up to you to save him, basically explaining the lack of co-op. Which is a bit of a shame that they couldn't really get any link cable action going, but hey, is what it is. And as you strike down all these adorable monstrosities on your quest to save your bro, you'll notice that they drop a little tablet, each unveiling fragments of the story as you go along, all leading up to the big twist. 10 bonus levels at the end. That's right, the Game Boy game has 60 stages, with an all-new end boss as Snowman's worst enemy, the sun.
God, I'm melting! I'm melting! Oh,
You're a weed, not a snowman.
it burns!
And so does that price tag. Ugh. Snow Bros. On Game Boy definitely has its own charm and tries to overcome its limitations, which, to be fair, it does in some ways, but let's be real, it's still more of a novelty for only the most hardcore of Snow Bro fans, and is definitely one of those, play it any way you can kind of games, if you catch my drift. Sega! Speaking of which, this brings us to the last of the retro Snow Bros games, the Megadrive version. That's right, Genesis don't do what Nintendo does this time. Released exclusively in Japan and Korea in 1993, Sega's Snow Bros is easily the greatest tragedy of the series, in that us English speakers didn't get it. I mean, just look. The opening cutscene alone should show that this version is just oozing with love. Unlike the Game Boy version that literally drops you at the main menu after pressing start, Sega's Snow Bros is the only retro title with a few options to play with, letting you adjust the difficulty to your liking, as the challenge of the arcade version returns in full force here. But how this version compensates for the lack of infinite quarters? or gems, is by sporting a password system. And while it can be kind of annoying to have to put in a password every time you game over, instead of just, continuing, at least it means you don't have to beat the game in a single sitting, as it is the longest Snow Bros yet, rocking 70 levels. And what's more, after you beat the original arcade boss, as this game is the most faithful to the arcade version up until the extra stages, the game then blindsides you with a Shyamalan-style twist that's actually way ahead of its time. Plus, Snow Bros in space! This series is so goofy and charming, I love it. And just so you know, while it doesn't actually change the gameplay, I still don't want to spoil it for you because I highly recommend checking this version out for yourself, as Sega's Snow Bros is hands down the best of the lot. And I have nostalgia for the NES version, so I think that's saying something. But we've still got one Snow Bros game that should, in theory, easily reign supreme. The shiny new remake with all the modern amenities that we could hope for. Snow Bros. Nick and Tom Special. And I'll grant, it makes a solid first impression. In a world where game cases have so much empty space, you could easily find them in the chips aisle. One game dares to be bold, dares to be different, dares to include an instruction manual, as well as stickers. Neat! And this isn't even the special edition either. Anyway, at its base, Snow Bros. Special is a full-on remake of the original Snow Bros. Arcade game, just with a shiny new paint job and a few bells and whistles of the modern era. Perfect for all newcomers of the series. Or so you would think. Released exclusively for the Nintendo Switch in 2022 by CRT Games, not Toaplan this time, which becomes very evident at an exact point in the game, Snow Bros. Special is very much a mixed bag, with some nice additions, but also some rookie mistakes. For example, of all the Snow Bros. Games, this version easily has the loosest controls, excluding the mobile port of course, making it way too easy to accidentally fire off your snowballs when you didn't mean to. But on the other hand, right at the title screen, we see that aside from the main campaign, alternate modes and options are available to help expand the life of the game, such as a time trial mode and a one life mode, which is great and all, but I can't help but notice that the most important modern addition needed is completely MIA. The online co-op! Where is it? And considering all the retro games can be played online with friends via a netcode, that's not a good look. Doubly so if Nintendo ever puts the NES or Megadrive versions on the online services. Fortunately though, Snow Bros. Special has proven to be a solid game in its own right. So ignoring that glaring flaw and jumping right into the main game, we are greeted with an absolutely charming opening cutscene explaining the story in a way that I absolutely love. Though I can't quite say the same for the graphics. Of all our Snow Bros. Contenders, Special obviously has the most changes visually, with much larger, more detailed characters and less pixelated sprites. And look, I'm not gonna beat around the bush here, I'm not really a fan of this style, especially with the bosses, as a lot of the movement is a bit off-putting to me. Honestly, it's kind of hard to describe, but basically it's using more puppetry movement, the kind you see a lot with VTuber loading screens on streams, where an image is kind of being warped around for animation as opposed to having different animated frames. And look, it's not bad, I'm just not a fan, except for the writing of the snowballs here. Look at him smile, so happy, I like that. But yeah, overall, not for me, though that is personal preference, make of it what you will. The backgrounds on the other hand don't have this issue, still looking as zany as ever, with the entire game retaining that bright and colorful vibe, though this time leaning into more what I'd expect from an old Flash game. The music also follows suit, taking all the original catchy tunes and completely remixing them, transforming them from the earworms of the NES era into more actiony tunes, which, believe it or not, is actually more fitting with what's to come, as the real star of the show here is the game's new content. Not 50, not 60, not 70, not 80, oh wait, Wait, no, it was 80. Definitely 80. Yes, the record for the most stages added to the original game belongs to the remake, with 80 stages. And, just like the others, new story bits have been added to justify them. The bros are going off to finally break the curse and change themselves back to normal. You know, guys, you could have saved yourself a lot of hassle by just getting yourself some soup, right? That said, it's the exact moment that counter flips from stage 50 to 51 that we can clearly see the torch switch hands from Toaplan to CRT. Yeah, so here's the thing. While there are plenty of new stages, enemies, and bosses added in the previous titles, they all still felt like they belonged in those games. In fact, if you play the Megadrive version before the arcade game, you might actually find yourself asking where the ending went. Hell, the Gameboy version might even invoke that feeling. The new stages and special though, not so much. But, not in a tacked on for content kind of way. They don't feel cheap or anything, but they definitely don't feel like they were made by the same people that designed the original stages, which works in some ways, but not so much in others. Where it works, ironically, is in the art style, which fits the new stages and enemies much better, with more focus on atmosphere. It kind of makes me wish that they had just made another Snow Bros sequel instead of trying to make a remake of the original. Hell, the final stage of the game actually borrows mechanics from Snow Bros 2, which I covered previously on the channel, so be sure to go check that out. But they definitely dropped the snowball in that regard. To be as blunt as possible, the new stages just don't flow like the older ones do, seemingly being more focused on unique ways of taking down the new baddies instead of clobbering them all with one big avalanche. And while again a mixed bag, some of these enemies are neat, but a lot of them are not making a very good case for themselves, with the most egregious being these gargoyle statues that can snipe you from across the screen, in a game where fast twitch reactions really aren't supposed to be a thing. And then we have these giant beasts that do not go down via a snowball or even get turned into one, ending up being nothing more than battles of attrition, more akin to the boss fights, but without the needed enemy spawns to keep slamming them with snowballs. These kind of foes just don't work. Throw in new boss fights that are more focused around speed and dodging, which again, Snow Bros is not built around, and well, you get the idea. However though, there is one big saving grace that you have to pay for. So, Snow Bros Special, believe it or not, actually has DLC, which I actually didn't realize at first, since it comes with a physical copy and didn't need to be downloaded, and ironically is actually cheaper than buying the main game and DLC separately, which I only found out about the DLC because Nintendo decided to advertise it to me. Way to double dip, guys. Though I do get why, as it includes the coolest upgrade to the Snow Bros formula, the Monster Mode, which is exactly what you think it is. You get to play through the entire game of Snow Bros, but as the monsters, which the game most certainly is not built for, but in a good way. Getting to replay the game overpowered. Basically, every monster plays exactly like the Bros, but with bonus powers. Rolling, shooting fireballs, or my personal favorite, returning the favor and using the Blue Ninja's invincible spin move and flying all around the screen, hitting everything in my path. Completely busted. I absolutely love it. Plus, other monsters get unlocked as you progress, essentially adding extra objectives, though I can tell you that I really have no interest in replaying this game 30 plus times to do that, so your mileage may vary, but I can definitely see myself coming back to it every now and again for my Snow Bros fix, and just unlock a little bit more each time. And with that, we have our rankings, minus Snow Bros 3, which is actually an unofficial ROM hack of the Snow Bros featuring soccer balls, hot chicks, and an iconic beast from Doom. Yeah, seriously. I gave that game its own review, feel free to check that out, but for now... Hold up, what's this? There's one more game? How can that be? Okay. So, Released never for the Amiga by Ocean is yet one last take on Snow Bros that never got an official release. But thanks to the almighty power of the internet, the ROM has been dumped for all of us to enjoy. So let's take a look at it. Assuming, of course, we can get it to work. Easily the most glitchy and prone to crash of the bunch. Seriously, I'm pretty sure that if you beat the first boss with a basic attack instead of a snowball, it causes the game to break. Regardless though, Snow Bros on the Amiga, like all the others, has its own quirks. Though kudos to it for keeping the logo as cursed looking as possible. Seriously, what is with this in all these games? Just like the others, this version also starts with an opening cutscene depicting the princesses getting caught. Except that this time, there's only one. As unfortunately, due to technical limitations, this version is only one-playered. Kinda defeating the point of bros in the title, don't you think? But hey, it was never actually released, so we're gonna let that slide. After doing your best Altered Beast impression, we get what is honestly one of the best additions to this version. Little title cards at the start of every 10 stages with custom boss art. I love this. In fact, this is a great looking version as well, capturing a lot of the eerie whimsy of the arcade game point for point. Though interestingly, this is the only version of the Bros with a color palette featuring green. You know what? I bet this is just the long lost third bro that nobody knows about. Otherwise, we are looking at mostly the same charming game as the arcade version, with 3 exceptions. First, this version is super generous with potions, even the OP green ones. Second, this game has life drops, which are also kind of plentiful, but also necessary as there are no continues, and we've got the lowest life count of the lot. Plus, this version is arguably the most brutal, with enemies that are more prone to chasing you. On top of that, the game actually defaults you to easy mode, which, and I'm not 100% on this because of how often the game crashed on me, but I think easy mode ends at level 30, where normal mode is the full game. But in normal mode, enemies are a lot faster than say in the arcade version, and they definitely escape snowballs quicker too. And definitely not helped by the fact that the controls are a bit awkward. Jump should definitely not be up, unless this is a fighting game. Toasty! The last major change worth talking about is yet another new bonus game. This time, doing our best Sonic impression. And with that, now we finally have our rankings. With the clear and honestly unexpected best version being the Megadrive version at the very top and easily the one I recommend the most. Snow Bros Special with DLC is right below that, followed by the tried and true arcade version. Can't go wrong there. Special without DLC ties with the NES version after that, and if you can get the Amiga version working properly, that will go right below them, just above the Gameboy port, which is obviously bringing up the rear. But at the end of the day, no matter which version you choose, all of the Snow Bros games are fun, simple, and charming cult classics that you and a friend definitely need to check out. Unless of course it's the mobile version, in which case, screw microtransactions.